Hello and welcome to OverShadow ShadowCast with your host Thomas Anderson and no one. Unfortunately, Abigail cannot join us this week. It is just you and I. So unfortunately, I have to be tech wizard as well as the host, and as we know from previous attempts at this, sound quality is an obvious casualty of that particular arrangement, but I have a new piece of equipment now, and hopefully that will improve things, so we'll give it a go. I might be sitting too close, I've never used it before. I'm trying to modulate my voice, try to make it a little bit calmer and a little bit lower so that I don't basically blast the microphones because they seem to be very sensitive. Apologies if you hear any creaking of seats or anything like that. Hopefully with the first go with this particular device I can learn the idiosyncrasies and work it out. So I think the first thing we have to talk about, it hasn't been what I've been doing but what we weren't able to do, which was get the podcast up, the 65 on time. That went up on Friday. Recently we've been having some major difficulties with the export process and with the upload and processing process on YouTube. And I think this is to do mostly, I think YouTube have possibly changed something recently. Although the reason I say that was because 64, the upload and processing happened all in one go, as it did with 65. Previously it did those two things separately. So the bar filled for the upload and then it started again and went back through for the processing. That's not what happened the past two podcasts, and it's taken both of them 2.5 hours to do. In the case of the export, it just failed several times. There's nothing I could do. There was nothing wrong with anything. There was plenty of space on the hard drive. There's just nothing I could get it to export properly. And my particular software it exports it as an MP4 or something like that. I think it's an MP4, but it doesn't export it just as an MP4. That's not what you select. What you select is YouTube. And I think if there's been a change to YouTube, they've changed the way they deal with video loading up a new video uploads. It might have changed how my editing software is working, because I have attempted. I've been doing two exports since that adaptation to YouTube, and then subsequent patch was downloaded for my software, and it's struggled both times. So hopefully I've got another piece of equipment coming. Hopefully it'll be here by, not this one obviously, but by the next one, and then hopefully the problem will be no longer an issue. But it was completely unavoidable on our part, and obviously on my part, because it was me that did this. It wasn't really Abigail's fault. Obviously I'm sorry that we couldn't get that up on time, but there was absolutely nothing that we could do about it. We'll just try and arrange something so that it doesn't happen again. So normally we move on to talking about what we've been playing, but frankly that's more fun when Abigail's here as well, because there's a bit more bounce back with the conversation. But also, secondly, I don't really think I've been playing much. I tried Smite recently with a friend of the channel from university, and she has a channel of her own, and that was very interesting, but unfortunately I wasn't able to get past the training stage. I did the initial tutorial, we did a bit of a practice, and then we did a game against bots to test it, but I wouldn't want to talk about that game before I'd actually played it against real people like you're supposed to. So all I'll say is that it looks very interesting, very complicated, but that just means there's a lot to sink your teeth into. It looks like it'd be fun to play with a group of people on team chat, but maybe not as fun for me personally as something like Destiny or Halo. Probably Destiny for one of the raids, or GTA for a heist, but I am looking forward to playing it some more because it does look like it could be very entertaining. You could lose some time in that game quite happily. I've still been. We mentioned briefly last week that we've been playing Forza 6. I've been playing more of that, and I'm heading my way through it. I didn't realise just how big that game was actually. I thought you just did what each racing series once, but apparently you do it once for each set of applicable vehicles. So basically each race set gets done 6 times, so it's 6 times bigger than I thought it was. Oh my goodness me. But I do like the prize spin, which for every level it gives you a potential prize. That I think that's new from 5, I don't remember it. But I do like that. If I feel really heavily rewarded in this game for playing, and that the tokens aren't so... what you get for spending real human cash, they aren't so pressing. The game feels a bit lighter and a bit more colourful. The one thing I would say is that when it comes to the actual driving, I feel that 5 wasn't better, but it was far more... it gave you far more feedback. I never got to a point where I wasn't able to drive in 5 and didn't know why. Why am I skidding out? Why am I going wide? I don't understand. I always understood. It gave me the feedback I needed. Very seldomly on screen. I'm holding a controller now so I can explain it better in my head. Seldom it was done on screen, but it was occasionally. But mostly it was done with the feedback rumble and the triggers and things like that, because I'm playing it on Xbox One S, and it just doesn't feel like 6 is doing that as well as 5 was. It just feels a little bit like... about half the time I start to skid out, I don't really understand why. I'm not getting the feedback I need. Maybe that's a bit harsh, maybe it's more like 25% or even 15%, but it feels like a huge number of times. In fact, it's probably only like 10%, but it feels overwhelming the number of times that I don't really understand why I'm going wide, and then it gets worse in the rain. Because I understand it's harder to drive, but if you're not getting the feedback, it feels worse. It's actually better, I think. I think the game is actually better. The controls feel better when it comes to everything working. But and when you go off, the feel you get from it is, okay, I went off, that feels great, it looks right. And it probably makes sense somewhere. But I don't get the feedback to tell me what to do to stop it. So I understand I've accelerated too much, but at what point? Was it heading up to the corner, going into it, in the middle of it, coming out of it? Was it after the corner? Where did I accelerate? And was it too much, or was it just that fact I accelerated at all? And then you'll travel a corner, you'll go round it the exact same way as you did before, and you'll be fine. Then the next time you'll skid out again, even if you replicate it perfectly. It just feels like there's some feedback that's not quite there. So I suppose the distinction is I understand... yes, that makes sense that I've spun out or gone wide. But I don't know what I'm supposed to do about it because I'm not getting any feedback for how or why. And so it just doesn't quite feel right, which is a shame. And in the rain it's even worse because you need more sensitive controls in the rain, and I just don't think you have it. Like, the acceleration and braking is fine. The real problem is the feedback rumble. It just doesn't... if 5% of the trigger pull is where you want to be, the rumble just doesn't give you enough of a warning. It's full rumble until you're in it, and then it's full rumble once you're out. There's no gradation that lets you know you get it. It's set for dry track loss of traction. It's not set for wet track, so it needs it needs to be adapted for that, or it should have been. It obviously won't be now because 7's out and they're making 8, but that's what it's missing when it comes to the rain. It's got a bit of a settings issue there, and that's been really working on my mind and really annoying me. I've found a few, unlike with 5, I've found a number of times I've just thought I'm uninstalling this. I never have, but I'm getting close to that at times, and that's never happened for me with a Forza game before, and I think it's just that feedback. I just want the feedback in the controller. I believe everything that's happening, I just want to know why so I can fix it. And I feel that's extremely frustrating to me at the moment. But I'll keep going and I'll see how I feel once I've finished it. So as Abigail's not here, and that's all I've really been playing, and to keep this moving quickly, because to be honest, a big part of the podcasts is the fact that me and Abigail are here bouncing off each other. So we want to keep this moving because that's missing. We're going to move on to the stories that I've decided we're going to talk about. So, as we said last week, the role of Japanese developers in the games industry and their overall effect. Abigail's back next week, so that's when we're going to discuss that. So we don't have that this week, but we're getting ready to have it. The first story we're going to talk about is another story about Borderlands 3. Borderlands 3 is making some consoles crash due to overheating. Even the Xbox One X has been reported to have crashed, some people's Xbox One X's. Particular facet of the information is key because that's the most powerful console. That's the one that should be least likely to crash, and even it is struggling with the overheating. It's very clearly some sort of issue with the game is causing the CPU, GPUs, all that sort of, all the chipsets to go basically mental. Now, I don't understand enough. I think I have enough of the technical information to understand how consoles work, but for some reason I've never actually looked into it. Which I might do if this story keeps going, but this might have something in relation to the previous story we spoke of last week with the frame rate issues. I think it might just be that the way that Borderlands 3 software is interacting with the hardware on consoles is just taxing them just far too much. It might be just something silly like really badly coded processes causing a lot of the CPU power, a lot of the power of the console to be transferred to what should be a simple process, so it's causing the thing to overheat. Because most games don't have problems like this on console. It's more of a PC issue if you try to put a game into a computer that can't handle it and you've got overclocking and that sort of thing. But as I was clumsily trying to say, the Xbox One X has the most, because of its CPU, GPU, chipsets, all the rest of it is the most powerful console. It shouldn't be the one struggling with this, and it is also struggling, so clearly it's a problem with the game. Console games shouldn't really do this. We obviously had the Ring of Death and stuff for the 360, but that's because the console wasn't designed with enough fans. That's not the case with the current console generations. They're sort of fine with that sort of stuff, so that this shouldn't be happening. We don't have any more information on that other than I suppose that's a warning for anyone who has the game on console, and we'll keep an eye on this. I think we'll move on to another story. So the Season 11 update for Fortnite is coming up soon. Season 11 will be adding bots to Fortnite. They've claimed that this is an attempt to attract new players, because obviously you don't want to go into a game like Fortnite once you know that the people who are in there have had a couple of years of experience and they're all becoming exceedingly amazing. You don't really want to touch it, so this is their way of attracting new players who are otherwise too afraid. The bots fill out the games at the bottom, along with a new matchmaking system to try and put the more skilled players together and the less skilled or newer players together to give people a chance to learn. Because just being wiped out by the world's best as soon as you pop in, you've got no chance to actually learn anything. Bots have been used before in things like PUBG, but I feel that this is also, they're trying to fill the games out because their player count has dropped slightly, and this could be a way of them filling out the games so that maybe instead of having 20 really brand new players and having to put them in with the really amazing players, who you risk losing those new players if they keep getting shot within 5 seconds every game. You put the 20 players in with bots or other new players if you can find them, and you put 20 bots in to replace them for the exceptional players. That might just... it means that you're less likely to lose the players you've got, and simultaneously you might be able to advertise it as they have done as a way of bringing in new players. As I said, they've been used in PUBG before, but I'm not sure how well a bot would function in a game like Fortnite because of the gameplay style, but we'll have to wait and see. I personally won't see because I won't be playing it, but the issue with the player count and the fact they're having to desperately attract new players, that's interesting. Because we might be hitting a point where these games start to... like, we've already had the heyday of Battle Royale has already come and gone, but we might be hitting a point where it's died so much that just the core games are left, and we'll have to see whether or not Fortnite is one of them, because there are quite a few Battle Royales still running. So the next story is actually is actually a Fallout 76 Bethesda-ish story, but not really. It's a bit strange, this one. It's to do with Fallout 76 and a piece of and a collectible that was sold regarding Fallout 76, and it relates to a potential health scare that was doing the rounds since the last podcast. So the actual health scare was that there was a risk of mold in the Fallout 76 Nuka-Cola helmet that was sold, I believe, in America by GameStop. The mold issue was in relation to the red and white paint scheme helmet collectible, and the risk was believed to have occurred during the transport from the manufacturer to the retailer. Now, the retailer was GameStop. So in other words, it was the freight company that they believe that's where any potential contamination or mold risk occurred during while the freight company was in possession of the collectibles. Now, no one is at risk at the moment anymore because the collectibles that were sold, they've all been recalled for evaluation and they've all been accounted for. But there was a huge amount of hype regarding this story as a massive potential health scare, and that caused a big problem. And it was hype that was sensationalized hype by gaming journalists who basically got the story wrong, possibly on purpose, just to try and get more clicks or sell more copies, or whatever. I think it was internet, so it would have been get more clicks, get more people passing through the story. So they reported that it was up to as many as 20,000 of these helmets were a potential risk. Now the issue is that while 20,000 of these helmets were made, only 32 were sold, which I think somebody said was 0.0016%, but I didn't bother doing the mathematics on that, so I don't really know, but it's a tiny proportion. It's 32 of 20,000 were sold. Might be why GameStop are in trouble. But because they didn't accurately report that 32, it caused a bit of a problem. It also turns out that the collectibles were recalled in July. It's now the end of September. So why this was a big problem now doesn't really seem to make sense. So what seems to have happened is that the journalists in question just sensationalised the story a bit, and maybe they just didn't appreciate how badly that was going to go or how big it was going to be, because there were people genuinely worried. And it turns out it was just one particular type of collectible. I don't believe, although I could be wrong, I don't believe it was the power armor helmet that came with the special collector's edition of 76. I think this was a different thing, because it says Nuka-Cola helmet and it's a red and white paint scheme. I'm pretty certain that the paint scheme was the normal grey for the power armor edition for Fallout 76, so this was a separate collectible. And I think that the sensationalised reporting of this is what's caused all the problem. It was completely and utterly fixed, and I believe actually that some of the press knew that this had been fixed in July. So again, another problem with sensationalised reporting. And there was also some suggestion that of the 32 that were recalled, some of them were recalled before they were actually shipped out to the customer. So this was not a massive problem at all in the scheme of what was the problem and where was the response by the companies in question adequate to protect public health, and it was, so there's no problem. Obviously they were a problem because they were a health risk due to mould, and that has to be investigated. But that's not the same as saying that they're a current health risk or that their behaviour of the company in question was a risk, because as soon as they found out, they recalled. So this has been sensationalised and blown up, and to be honest, it's probably something that we might not have even spoken about if it wasn't for the fact that it had been overblown to the point where people were actually worried. So we thought we would send that story out just to add to the calls. You know, if you're talking about a health thing, I can understand being slightly hyperbolic just to make sure that people get checked or get the information they need, or whatever type of health thing it is we're talking about. but that's different from sensationalizing it. So this is where I think that the ethics of the situation don't seem to have been properly obeyed, and that's caused a problem. So we're just putting out there that it's all been sorted-ish, and we should be okay-ish, and everybody can calm down-ish. We'll keep an eye on it if anything gets worse, but if they just deal with it, we probably will never bring it up again. The last story I've got here to talk about is a bit bigger, a bit more, well, maybe not a bit bigger, but it's definitely more important. It speaks quite strongly to the issue we have at the minute when it comes to predatory behaviour by game publishers and developers. But also there is some positive moments in there too, so this is quite an interesting story we have here to finish on. So Activision recently said that they were dropping the season pass for Call of Duty Modern Warfare. That sounds lovely, that sounds fantastic. Unfortunately they decided to pick up a hammer, which probably cost 32 quid if you can judge by looking at Black Ops 4, and they decided to smack all the customers and players over the face with it anyway. And this is how they did it. Call of Duty Modern Warfare has a Special Ops Survival mode, which will be exclusive to PlayStation 4 for a year. So apparently, there was a developer that said that this was just 1% of the content, but I think that tweet has since disappeared, because others have said that the Special Ops Survival mode is half of Special Ops, and Special Ops is 1/3 of the game modes that are available at launch. So if the mathematics are very clear and plain across the board, that's 16.66666 recurring percent of the game will be exclusive to PS4. I'm not sure about the survival mode, but I do remember the Spec Ops from Modern Warfare 2. I played a lot of that with friends, and that was incredible. So if it's anything as good as that, then this is a big loss. Even outside the mathematics of how much of a percent it is, that's a big loss when it comes to gameplay enjoyment for non-PlayStation 4 players. This is also very, very strange when you take into account the fact that Call of Duty is a yearly release. So by the time this comes out for the other consoles, they probably won't support it. So even if it does come out for the other consoles or computer, or PC, sorry, is a better way of phrasing it, they might, even if it does come out, they might not support it. So if there's any problems with it, it will just be broken on those machines. So that's not really very fair. So it's a very strange... it's a very, very, very strange thing. I mean, it's made less strange by the fact that you can tell that this has probably made Activision some extra money and they don't care. So that probably stops it being strange. But at the minute, for me, it's... Speaking from somebody who would just want everybody to play the game, that's strange. But, I can get it. If it's, Activision just try to rake in the cash and they don't care about the player. Another slap in the face is the fact a prominent, trustworthy source has leaked that this Call of Duty Modern Warfare will have guns in loot boxes. So again, if the guns are better, it'll be pay to win, or even if they're not, if people think they're better, people will keep buying loot boxes to get that gun. That's the predatory behaviour that I mentioned at the beginning. That's not great. Because as we know, loot boxes are by their nature addictive, and they prey on the most vulnerable in society. So this putting in a gun makes it even more predatory, even more addictive, even worse, because you add an almost logical reason for people to be addicted, and that's not cool. And on the plus side, Activision has admitted that they have been negatively affected by some boycotts after all of this. There have been some people, especially in Xbox, who are refusing to buy the game. They've cancelled their pre-orders because of the exclusivity. In other people's cases, they've cancelled it because of the guns and loot boxes. And that's good. It's good that Activision are finally being hit for their predatory business practices, because as I mentioned last week during a debate about the EA and ESA, I feel that Activision have been somewhat beyond reproach on this, and yet they definitely shouldn't be. And so to see people coming out against it is very positive. An interesting thing though, and I don't necessarily blame the developer, but it's obviously his job, and it's somebody way above his pay grade that's made these decisions, because we know for a fact that from other developers speaking out that the executives make the decisions for the games. It's not the developers. The developers don't get any input. But Call of Duty developer has claimed that, or he did say online that calling out predatory monetization has been inflammatory. So obviously that's not what he's claimed or said, but he has. People have called out the predatory monetization of the Call of Duty previous ones and this one, and he has described that language as inflammatory and not helpful. And we have to talk about the real problem. No, this is the real problem, and I understand that's just that person's job, and there's absolutely nothing that they can really do about it because of the way that Activision works, and especially in America, because their employment laws are essentially non-existent. But I believe it is a man. He is completely wrong. It's not inflammatory, right? If it is inflammatory and it does cause some sort of societal inflammation, it's in response to the infectious behaviour of predatory business practices and things like loot boxes. Remember, inflammatory, I'm an immunologist. Inflammation isn't necessarily a bad thing. So I have to disagree with this person on this. As an immunologist, you can't just bandy the word. I know you can in today's society, but you just can't just decide that the word inflammatory is bad, because it's not. To me, it's not. To me, it's a good thing. It can sometimes be a bad thing, but it's also a good thing. So he can call this as inflammatory as he wants, but that means he's describing the business practices of his company as being an infection we have to clear. That's absolutely fine by me. Like, he's using the key words to get people who may not entirely understand the concepts involved, because they just aren't keyed into that culture, that they might just not be keyed into gaming and the predatory microtransactions or macrotransactions or monetization and loot boxes, that sort of thing. And he's using this phrasing to try and get certain people to agree with him, because that's where his power comes from. Obviously, it's not really him, it's the executives who've made him do this, but that's why he's using that word choice. That people defending the most vulnerable in society cannot be called inflammatory just because you disagree. Trying to protect the most vulnerable and trying to have a moral and ethical gaming development business model, economic sector, that shouldn't be considered that by its own nature isn't inflammatory. So I dislike heavily what this developer's response actually means, which is that the executives are trying to protect themselves from deliberately targeting the most vulnerable, because that's what this means. So I've done it again. I've managed to have one on my own where I end up preaching, and there's not been a single joke in the whole thing, but that's just what happens for some reason. I think she deliberately does this. I think Abigail leaves when she knows I'm going to go essentially all Smite ye, almighty smiter. Yeah, that's all the stories we've got time for. In good news, Abigail is back next week and we can talk about the effect of Japan on the gaming sector, which I'm looking forward to an awful lot, because it's the only question we've been asked to actually debate, and I feel that if we don't, then we lose any sense of tiny sliver of credibility we might have. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I hope you can join us next week. If you did like that, please click a like, and you can also click to subscribe, and you can click the notification bell to be alerted whenever we upload, which has for the first time in our history become variable. You can also follow us on Facebook at overshadow.shadowcast, and you can send us an email at overshadow.shadowcast@gmail.com. Other than sending us an email, you can leave us a comment in the comment section below. We'll read any that come in. You can ask us any questions, you can give us any opinions, and we'll have a look at them. Just say anything you have to say. We'll filter it if we feel the need to. Any of the links that I've spoken about will be in the description below. And as I said, next week we're talking about Japan. We hope that you can join us, because that should be a good one. And we'll see you then. Bye.